Hello, everyone. It's Jamarl Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So, my lovely wife is not here today. Somebody said once before, "Well, where's the tech person? Where's Miss Thomas?" She's not here today. She'll be here throughout the course of the talk. But I do have Jared Beck. Jared Beck just so happens to be here. He's going to be here for a live talk, for a live interview, and for some questions afterwards about the DNC fraud lawsuit. I am making sure that this is going out before I bring him on. So give me 1 second. I just want to make sure there's no weirdness with the stream. Let's see. Come on. All right. Come on. Give me 1 second. It's just showing this online. I'm seeing broadcasts, I'm seeing viewers, but when I'm looking on my page, I'm seeing it offline. Let's try this one more time. Yes, here we are. Come on. There we are. Good. It's showing live. Jared, could you say hi to the Progressive Soapbox's audience, please?
Hello, everyone. It's good to be here with everyone tonight. Looking forward to a great discussion, and thanks for having me, Jamarl.
Absolutely. Now, that's Jared's lovely wife, but it is not his wife who's on today. It is actually Jared.
And I don't know why she's wearing a Santa hat in the picture, but she likes to wear hats.
The Santa hat is awesome. The Santa hat is awesome. She's perfectly fine. So, Jared, explain how this started. I would imagine my audience knows the beginning of it, but just tell them who you are for me and how you've exploded onto the scene in regards to our sandbox. And not just our sandbox. That was a Newsweek article that went on it. So I'm going to say even from a national profile standpoint. But why are you known? Mm-hmm. Who is Jared Beck, and why is Jared Beck known at this point?
In a nutshell, my wife Elizabeth and I are lawyers in Miami, Florida. We've had our own practice since 2007 when we started our own law firm. We have a plaintiff's side law firm. We like to take on big battles on behalf of regular people against corporations. That's really the basis of our practice. We do a lot of class actions. In the last, how we come to the point where we are today really started back in 2016 when my wife Elizabeth really began feeling the burn during the presidential primaries, and she just really fell in love with Bernie Sanders' message. And we hadn't really been very political people before Bernie Sanders. I did a little bit of political activism back when I was in college, but we were basically at the time very focused on our law practice. We also have 2 young kids. And so, we kind of got pulled into politics in large part, through Bernie Sanders.
I see.
His really unique message that I think was, something unique, at least in, in my lifetime, as an American and an observer of the political scene.
Yeah.
So we started an organization called Jam Pack in early 2016, which was basically just kind of an experiment. And the thought was, well, there are all these super PACs out there. They take corporate money, big money, and they influence our elections. And when Bernie Sanders came on the scene, our thought was, well, why don't we put together our own organization for Bernie to help get Bernie's progressive message out. And at the time, as people may recall, and this is early 2016, there was this mainstream media prevailing narrative that Bernie Sanders was having a lot of trouble connecting with Democratic voters in various
minorities.
Yeah, African Americans, Hispanics, and so forth. And Elizabeth was very, very active down here in the Bernie, getting the word out about Bernie, and she was going to all sorts of events. We were having a phone banks in our office. We were trying to get the word out. And when we saw this mainstream narrative, it just didn't ring true to us, because we knew that the people that were drawn to Bernie's message were just as diverse a crowd of people as you can think of. That's all right. Backgrounds, all ages. I think just completely the opposite of what the mainstream media was suggesting. And so we thought at the time that it might be a good idea to start getting out. We used some of our savings to fund the organization initially. We took a small number of donations through crowdsourcing, and we were basically making videos highlighting Bernie's message resonating with various people across the country, including Hispanics and Spanish-speaking people. And our aim was to get those videos out to the public through social media to counterbalance against a lot of what was being propagated untruthfully in the mainstream media.
No, I can understand that.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm not interrupting.
That was that was where we were. And then, things sort of took this very unexpected turn when a man by the name of Nico House came into our office in February or March, around then, 2016, with some very disturbing evidence that the Democrat or the Bernie campaign was being infiltrated in key areas. And so that was the moment I put on my lawyer hat and started to think about what was going on here. We didn't think at the time that it was going to turn into a lawsuit, but then in June of 2016, Guccifer 2.0 dropped the first batch of internal DNC documents, and that was the basis for the lawsuit that we filed and what is now known as the DNC fraud lawsuit.
I see. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. It's interesting. The narrative that they couldn't connect with minorities, that was the narrative that they crafted. Like when you're looking at the book Shattered, or if you're looking at the DNC leaks, one of the things came up was Tom Perez, actually. It was Tom Perez's brainchild. Let's say that he can't connect with minorities. Let's tar Bernie Sanders as the white candidate. I mean, they didn't necessarily think to themselves that, hey, if we tar him as a white candidate, we ourselves are being tarred as a candidate of minorities, which is also going to adversely affect us in regards to the general election with whites. They took it as purely, how do we get out the primaries? We're going to tar the guy as a white candidate. Let me ask you this. When you hear people kind of poo-poo this case, they're like, ugh, it's just politics, man. Right. Get over it, man. When you hear cases like that, those cases aggravate me. What would you say to those people? Meaning, what's the defense to those people saying, dude, this is not something that you have to have a lawsuit over? Right. What's the answer to that?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what I say in my defense, because I was one of the people that was fooled. And, I went to Harvard College. I got a degree in social studies, and I studied a lot of political science as part of my degree. Then I went to graduate school in the PhD program in government, also at Harvard. I did 2 years in that program, and then I went to law school. And I got all those degrees and all that education, and I had no idea that our political system was like this.
Really?
I had no idea. I believe.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. That's amazing. Go ahead. I'm cynical. I'm so used to this that I'm.
There are cynics out there that say, rigging, has always been part of the system. But, I don't think that the reasonable ordinary person in our society believes that. I think that we believe as a country that we live in a democracy. Now, there may be some political insiders and hardened political observers who, you know, have always taken a cynical approach. But I would say that the people in this class, the people that gave money to Bernie Sanders, that reached into their own pocket and gave money to this man so that he could run a campaign for the nomination, they did not believe that. They believed they were giving money to a bona fide campaign in a bona fide democratic election. So that's what I say to those people.
Agreed. No, I agree. I'm cynical from the standpoint of money influencing politics. Like somebody leaning a particular way because they wanted a particular thing. Cheating is different. Cheating is a different animal. I think cheating is different.
Yeah, no, money in politics is, you know, separate from, you know, when we talk about this case and we talk about the corruption in our political system, we have to be very specific about what we're talking about. You know, this case is not about money in politics. This case is about the Democratic National Committee failing to live up to its own charter.
Preach.
Which requires it to be impartial and even-handed with respect to the primaries. In other words, it has to run those primaries democratically. It can't take sides. It can't take sides any more than, for example, the NFL can take sides in the Super Bowl, okay, and put a thumb on the scale for one team or another. It can't do that. It says so in the charter, and if it did do that, it wouldn't be running democratic elections. That's primary rigging. Money in politics, you know, that's a broader problem. I would say that really starts, you know, with the Citizens versus United case and all the cases leading up to that, which basically says that money in politics is a reality of the American system. In fact, I would go so far as to say that the Supreme Court has made it clear that, you know, the payment of donations, political contributions, is the quintessential form of political participation in this country, even more than voting itself. And that is, you know.
No, it is. I agree. I mean, when you think of it, is that me or you?
Oh, sorry. I think my kid's screaming in the background. If you give me 1 second, I'm just gonna try to take care of that. Hold on.
Okay, no, you're fine.
1 second.
Well, I'm talking about the echo. Is your mic on by chance? I'm going to sort out his kid. Right on, man. He's right about this, by the way. The money in politics thing is a separate and distinct issue. So somebody may say, yes, this particular person is being paid to lean a particular way. It's a different thing, though, when the DNC is in the primaries and they're making decisions on who they themselves want to take over. Jared, are you back?
Yep, Jamarl, I'm back. Hopefully,
okay.
Hopefully my wife will distract our eldest. She's
oh,
that was
dude,
her.
You're absolutely fine. It's look, you're perfectly fine. You're a person. I only see you as a person. That's as far as it goes. So here's my argument, and it's not my argument. I think it's a BS argument, but I want to make the argument because the argument is going to be the argument that you deal with in the trial.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm the DNC, but I understand that people believe that as the DNC that we're this democratic organization, that we're here for the people and everything else. Well, those people are misguided. We're a corporation. And as a corporation, just like the Republican Party is a corporation, we can do whatever we want to do in terms of our corporation. Meaning, if we wanted to choose a guy in the back room smoking a cigar, smoking a stogie, if we want to do that, we can do that. We can choose that guy and we can push that guy up to be our primary candidate or our candidate to run in the general election. Now, that's literally one of the revelations. We can choose who we want to choose. That's the argument that they're for the most part making. Yes, we have a charter that we go by, but that charter is just purely internal to us as a corporation. We can cares about that charter. That charter is like Leela Gabani. We can lie if we want to lie. What's the defense? What's the argument against that? That's going to be the argument that you deal with in court.
So that's you pretty much gave a nutshell of what the DNC's leading argument was at the last hearing. And you know, this whole, I mean, when I heard the DNC's lawyers actually use the image of smoking cigars in the back room, I mean, I was literally shocked.
They're trying to make a stark thing. They're trying to be as blunt as they can be, saying, look, we can lie whenever we want to lie, dude.
Right.
And they're trying to give the worst image they can think of what is the image where we want to show that just a bunch of large plutocrats in the back room picking somebody.
Right.
That's the feeling that I got.
And I give opposing counsel Bruce Spiva, who made that argument, I give him credit for not hiding the ball.
Yes. That's a painful argument. If you're making that argument, oh man, that's an embarrassing argument to make.
Yeah. But I give him credit as for being candid and putting that argument forward in a very stark and dramatic way, because I think that that's very important in litigation, that lawyers not hold back and put their cards on the table. And I think the DNC is making that argument because I think, and I think you're alluding to this, as you described, their position, they want to maximize their power, and that's the position that maximizes their power, right? Yeah. They already are entrenched in our political system. They already control the means of our elections, the two political parties do, but they want to make that a legal principle. And so that's why they're putting that argument forth. Now, my response to that is, here's where they're wrong. And they're wrong because we live in a post-Citizens United age. Okay, what does that mean? It means, well, as we were discussing before, Citizens United is a reality in this country. Okay, that means that political campaigns are conducted largely through the solicitation of donations from the public, not just donations from the big corporations and the labor unions and the super PACs and so forth, but individuals in society. And that's what Bernie Sanders' campaign showed us, is that there's this potential to crowdfund a campaign. Just like you can crowdfund media now, you can crowdfund a political campaign. You can build an entire political campaign, not from big money donations, but from getting, $27 from people all across the country. I mean, we have homeless people in our class as named plaintiffs, at least one named plaintiff who, reached into their pocket and, gave what they had to Bernie Sanders. Okay. And so, this is sort of an expansion of Citizens United, maybe in an unexpected way. But what it means is that the laws of fraud now apply, okay, because you are taking money. And that's key, because once you start taking money from somebody, and once you start taking money based on false representations, you are in the world of fraud. It doesn't matter what the purpose of your organization is, whether it's a political party such as the DNC, whether it's Bernie Madoff, whether it's Coca-Cola, whatever. It doesn't matter. The laws of fraud apply, and you are subject to claims for fraud, a negligent misrepresentation, and so forth. And that's what gets us into court. And that's why the DNC is wrong. Because DNC wants to say, well, we're a political organization, you can't sue us. Not when you're taking people's money. That's our response.
Agreed. It's funny, I made that argument on my video. Okay. I kind of compared it to this thing of like if, let's say Coca-Cola, the company Coca-Cola was having an election. Coca-Cola, anything that's internal to Coca-Cola, have at it. It's on you. The moment that Coca-Cola comes out and says, hey, you can influence who wins the election. Hey, donate money to this particular person. Right. Well, now you've brought in the public. And the public is giving money thinking, I am being honest, or this is a fair and honest process that I'm engaged in. I took it as, if you're monkeying around with the process, then it's no longer fair and honest. You told me it was a fair and honest process, and now you're lying. Like, there's video of Deborah Wasserman-Schultz looking at the camera saying, no, it's fair. It's honest. Right. Trust us. Right. Trust us. That's amazing. I agree with you, man. Look, as somebody who, I voted for Nader in one of the other elections, but I didn't necessarily have this awareness. It was almost like it took me a few years to get this kind of political awareness. And initially it was, that's interesting. I don't understand why people are behaving this way. Then as you're further looking at it, you're like, wait a minute, I think these guys are being bribed. As you further look at it, it's like the more years you're involved in it, the more cynical you get. Yeah. And you start thinking to yourself, wait a minute, it is the height of cynicism to say that you can cheat a candidate. And then you can lie to the public and say, we're not cheating this candidate. It's amazing. That's amazing that's okay.
Yeah. Well,
that's
I think that's interesting. I mean, I think my own political awareness came much later than you. I mean, it really came through this past election cycle. And, it's the process of having, having your pocket picked.
Yeah.
That really, for me, it really crystallized it, because it's like, why, did I just spend all of these resources,
all of this time, all of this money,
all of this aggravation for a candidate who the DNC had determined from the start was not going to win?
And I would even go further than that. It's not just the money. It's not just the money. I showed a video the other day where Bernie Sanders was crying when he essentially got up and said, hey, I wanted to go to Hillary Clinton. And the Bernie Sanders supporters are weeping openly, unabashed, weeping on stage. I know how I felt when I went to a Sanders rally. It's a love fest, man. It's like you go there and you're standing outside for 7 hours. It's cold. It's freezing. Everybody is happy. Everybody is a hippie. Everybody gets in, and you don't know these people, but yet you're somehow connected to these people on this emotional level that each and every one of those people felt when that man talked. Right. And to go from that and to say, yeah, April Fools, we had already chosen who we were going to pick. All of this stuff was just for show. I understand you guys invested your feelings in them. Sucks for you.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that burns. Like, that's whether the DNC realizes it or not. If the DNC right now turns on a dime, it says, okay, guys, we're sorry. We're going to do all these progressive things that Bernie Sanders said. They still have to deal with that issue of you pissed a lot of people off and you defrauded a lot of people out of millions of dollars.
Yeah. No, you hit it right on the head. I mean, one of the things that the DNC has not reckoned with at any level, and I'm not sure why they haven't. I mean, I have my theories, but
it's too honest.
It's the issue that I mean, in every fraud case I've litigated, and I've represented many victims of fraud, the victim is never in a position to forgive the perpetrator until there's been justice.
Yes,
that's just the way it is.
Yes,
justice is a requirement.
Yes.
I mean, there's been, a couple places where I've seen, one time, Tom Perez came out and said, well, the primary was rigged, and then he walked it back the next day. But, there's never even been a public acknowledgement. And all of the evidence is sitting out there, on WikiLeaks. I mean, it's not like, there's really any doubt at this point. I mean, I never encounter anyone who argues with me on the issue of whether or not the primary was rigged. I mean, I would say that that's practically a point of consensus. Except among the diehard Hillary people, and who seem to be a shrinking number. But where the arguments come in is whether or not that leads to a viable claim in court. I mean, I think we have the strongest legal arguments by far on that issue. But in terms of the factual contentions, I mean, by and large, the people I come across seem to agree that the process was rigged, which I think is terrifying. I mean, we're supposed to be in a democracy here.
Yeah, that's terrifying. Right there, that statement. We're supposed to be in a democracy. Yeah, dude, you can't have a democracy in an oligarch. Like, you can't have a situation where you have some people with massive amounts of concentrations of wealth and then say we're in a democracy. It doesn't fly. But to take it the extra step, like it just, I don't know, man. It just burns. It's an amazing argument to me, to somebody to say, hey, we're being honest about this process. You can trust us. We're being perfectly honest. And then you find out, wait a minute, you lied. I sent all this money. I sent hundreds of dollars to this guy.
Right.
And I sent it believing that there was going to be a fair process. I only believed it was going to be a fair process because a grinning idiot on camera told me it was going to be a fair process. It's like which part? That's literally the definition of fraud. That's literally the definition of fraud. That blows my mind.
Right.
It blows my mind. Let me ask you this: what's the smoking gun evidence? What's the of the WikiLeaks? And I've gone through the WikiLeaks. I've seen a ton of the stuff that's gone on behind the scenes. Everything from the Clinton Foundation to conversations where Hillary Clinton is dealing with the DNC, and it's just kind of almost like this foregone conclusion. Yes, of course it's going to be us. Them attacking Bernie Sanders in the news, the DNC, even the throwing 100,000 people off the rolls. It's one thing after the next in that particular primary. What's the thing where you're like, right here, this is a problem. This is a problem, and this shouldn't take place, and this is the smoking gun evidence for fraud.
Yeah, I think everybody's, got their own. I mean, there's so many layers of this out there because, at the end of the day, what I've learned through this process and this case is just how deep the rabbit hole goes with respect to the political problems in this country. And the DNC is really only the tip of the iceberg. And so, there are so many layers here, and there's so much we don't know because we haven't even gotten into discovery yet. I mean, we're just going.
Explain that part. The so many layers and so much that we don't know.
We filed this case. We actually filed this case even before WikiLeaks came out. So we filed it on the basis of the Guccifer documents, and that was a very, very small set of internal DNC documents that, in my view and the view of our legal team, was a sufficient basis to, at that time, file a federal lawsuit. And so when you go to the Jam-Pack website today and you look at the complaint, what you see cited there are actually Guccifer documents. And the document that really, when I was drafting this complaint, that really stood out in my mind was the memorandum, internal DNC memorandum, and it's attached to our complaint, which very specifically lays out the strategy for advancing Hillary Clinton to not just the nomination but to the presidency, even before Bernie Sanders has announced his candidacy. Okay, and so based on that document, what you have is the outline of a plan which shows that the DNC is nothing more than an arm of the Hillary Clinton campaign. Okay, exactly the opposite of what it's supposed to be. And what the memo talks about are the various ways in which they're going to coronate Hillary Clinton. And it really goes to the way elections are conducted in this country, which is that the media works hand in glove with the DNC, the people in the DNC, to push narratives in front of the public. And so when they turn on their CNN or they turn on their MSNBC, they're going to get a story which shows them that Hillary, with respect to the primaries, that Hillary Clinton is the inevitable candidate and the candidate who will be chosen in order to battle Donald Trump. And we saw that narrative play out. But when you actually go into the DNC memos, and that's not just the only one, but for me, it's really the smoking gun, because it's like the outline of the false narratives that all of us saw play out in the mainstream media during that primary and then during the campaign.
That's fair. But it's the reason why it hits the level of fraud is not so much the narratives, it's just because they were coordinating with the Hillary Clinton campaign. It's like the DNC is supposed to be a fair arbiter, but the DNC is working with the Hillary Clinton campaign to put out narratives in the media.
Yes, I mean, the DNC is officially seeding the narrative in the media. So they're supposed to be running this election fairly, but what they're actually doing is coordinating the messaging in the media to ensure that Hillary Clinton gets the nomination. And that's just the media level. We're not even talking about, all the stuff that went on at the polls. Okay, yes. In terms of people purged from voter rolls, in terms of election machine tampering, in terms of infiltration at the Bernie campaign level. I mean, this, I'm just talking based on the documents that we pled in the complaint, but there's a whole, and this is what I meant by whole layers of evidence. You have evidence from the documents, and then you have evidence that's going to be testimonial and other kinds of evidence from people like, for example, people like Nico House, who was a volunteer in North Carolina during the Bernie campaign. And he saw with his own eyes, quote unquote, Bernie staff people doing what they could to sabotage Bernie's chances in those states. And we remember, how critical those early Southern primaries were in shaping the narrative. Okay. And so that infiltration. So where does Bernie get his staff people from? Well, they're given to him by the DNC. So the DNC is basically seeding Bernie's campaign with Trojan horses. Okay, that's another way in which this fraud works. And then of course we've got statistical evidence that's come to us showing that there had to be machine level issues going on, tampering and whatnot as part of this. There's and that you can go on and on. You can talk about the events of Nevada when the DNC
yes.
in and created a false narrative about the Bernie people throwing chairs, completely made it up. Okay, and that goes right into the charter. They're not supposed to pick sides when there's a dispute. Well, here in this case, they're actually creating a dispute and blaming it on the Bernie people. Okay.
Well, in order to hide stealing Nevada, like there's footage online that shows the vote. Essentially, they were making a vote. There was an issue with the delegates where more Bernie delegates essentially got to the place more than Hillary delegates.
Mm-hmm.
And at the very final vote, Sanders delegates were supposed to win Nevada. They just had the numbers. They took a floor vote, or just a voice vote. They lost the voice vote, and the person was like, "Yeah, carried." And then when the people complained about it, they said, "Oh, Bernie Sanders supporters were throwing chairs." Right. The throwing chairs thing was there to hide the fact that they stole Nevada. The people were pissed because they stole Nevada. The news media, Deborah Wasserman-Schultz, took this narrative of, Sanders need to get on his supporters. Sanders need to say something to supporters about throwing chairs and being rowdy.
Right, and that was Debbie Wasserman-Schultz who said that on CNN. And and then you dig into it just like you did, this is basically what the trial is going to be made of. This kind of testimony and this kind of evidence, and it's going to show that the DNC, in our view, it's going to show that the DNC was anything but impartial and even-handed in the conduct of this primary.
That's amazing, man. I have to be honest. I'm somewhat amazed that this is not more emphasized. I look, yes, I'm cynical in regards to how politicians lean and everything else. I always think it's either the money or the pitchforks, but I'm not so cynical that I think that democracy doesn't work. Like I know a lot of people are like, dude, all of this is so rigged that it doesn't really matter, and politics doesn't matter, and polls don't matter. I don't believe that. I don't believe it. There's a little childlike spark in me that says it's a democracy. On a basic level, it's a democracy, and the people shouldn't necessarily be able to cheat the process. So how do you get, let me ask you this. Do you think the media is just that cynical where they just kind of assume that, well, yeah, of course these processes are done that way? Or do you think this is not something we want to talk about because this goes against one of the major parties? And if we do this, we're not going to get, I guess, the access to the major parties that we would typically get. Like, it feels like there's some level of collusion between, put it this way, in my model of politics, there's a collusion between media and politics.
Right.
I don't think there's single things. Well, what's the hedge? Why isn't this in the mainstream media? Why isn't this more emphasized? I mean, because we are talking about democracy here. Like, we are talking about the ability to choose the elected leader of a country. That seems like a big goddamn deal to me.
Right.
That seems like a big deal. Whether you're talking about the primaries or anything else, it's very well believed that the person who was going to win the primaries was going to win against Trump because they assumed that Trump was just, ham sandwich against Trump. A ham sandwich wins.
Yeah.
So that made the primaries that much more emphasis on the primaries, and you got this race between somebody who was a classic Democrat, calls himself a socialist, but a classic Democrat, the one that the crowd wanted, and this other person who was essentially status quo. And there was clearly cheating. Like it's not one of those things where it's like, well, dude, that's a conspiracy theory. You can look at the documents. Why isn't this a bigger deal?
Right. No, I think that's that question really, in some ways, it really gets to the heart of what we're talking about in this case, which is perhaps a truth that people don't want to grapple with, or aren't ready to grapple with, or are afraid to grapple with, which is that the Democratic Party may have seen the end of the line here. Yeah. I mean, how do you recover? Like, let's go outside the parameters of just this lawsuit. How does a political party recover from defrauding its base?
That's a toughie.
I
have a hard time voting for a Democrat. I would imagine other progressives will feel the same way. 15 people left the party, man.
Is this something that it can recover from? That's a frightening question, I think, for a lot of people, especially those who are invested in the Democratic Party, in whatever way. It doesn't even have to be a material investment. It could be a psychological investment. But because you might be talking about issues that ultimately kill this party in one way or another. And then the question is, if that happens, where do we go from there?
Yeah.
As a country. Last time a major political party died was the Whig Party in the 1850s, because the Whigs failed to, they couldn't come up with a coalition against slavery. They didn't have a unified position on the issue, and that was the issue of the time. And so the Whigs just fell apart to be replaced by the Republican Party. But in the interim, we had the Civil War. So, this is, if that's the precedent we're talking about here, then, it makes sense why this is such a heavy question, and perhaps something that people don't want to talk about, even though we should be having that discussion. Regardless of what happens, we should be having that discussion.
That's an interesting point.
Especially progressives. We should be owning that discussion, because if we don't, then it's going to be an even tougher road ahead. That's my personal opinion, and it's a little bit outside of the issues in the lawsuit and more of a sort of a historical trajectory.
That's a fascinating point. Do you think that's self-censorship, meaning the media, I don't think, regards itself honestly. Like, so the media will have a conversation about us attacking another country, completely ignores the fact that we killed 1 million people in Iraq. Is that something similar to this, where the media is like, no, we have a democracy in this country, and anything that challenges the idea that we have a democracy in this country just gets ignored?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think, to a large extent, as we've discussed, the media was complicit in the fraud that we're talking about, and they know they were complicit. And so, if you know that you helped somebody perpetrate a fraud, you're not going to want to talk about that. You're going to look for every excuse not to talk about that, and to draw attention to that issue. So I think that's also what's going on when we're talking about, the mainstream media. But, in terms of who's talking about the lawsuit, we're seeing, some consistent coverage in the indie progressive media. We're also seeing a lot of interest in what people call the alt-right, a lot of interest in this lawsuit. And, what's interesting is there's, even though those two audiences come from, totally different ends of the political spectrum traditionally, there's a lot of consensus about issues pertaining to this lawsuit. That's in my, what I've observed. And, I think that's a positive. That's maybe a reason that there should be more discussion about this lawsuit, because there's actually a surprising amount of consensus.
I can understand that. Let me ask you this. Has there been any communication between you and the Bernie Sanders campaign?
None.
Bernie Sanders doesn't talk about this at all, even though Bernie Sanders has to know he was cheated.
Right.
Why do you think Bernie Sanders ignores this issue? I have to be honest. This is one of those things that annoys the shit out of me about Bernie Sanders on this one. Why do you think he? I have ideas on why he ignored it. Why do you think he ignores this? Why do you think he doesn't?
I think he's. I think his vision of America's political future is one that includes the Democratic Party as the vehicle for progressive ideals. I think that's the world he grew up in. That's the world in which he made his career. And, you know, it's not easy to give up a vision like that and this is what I mean by psychological investment. I mean, if you know, I mean, of course he, you know, this is a man who's an independent, but remember, he's operating in a world where ultimately anything that has gone under the rubric of progressive has happened within this tent that we call the Democratic Party. And because of that, you know, I think he's in that group of people that just don't want to deal with these issues because they're ultimately too frightening.
That's fair. Frightening is the right word for it. I mean, I think that's it. It's like, what's the paradigm if you find out that oh man, yeah, I can understand that, particularly from his perspective when that's the vehicle he's always used. Part of me thinks that it's also political in the sense of, if I say that they cheated me, I won't necessarily have access to the Democratic Party in 2020, or I couldn't influence Democratic politics.
Right. I mean, that's the other thing is that these two political parties, even though they're mentioned nowhere in our Constitution,
yes,
have come to control the political institutions in this country. And I see that as a real problem, and I think it goes beyond the lawsuit, okay? These political parties have evolved to become the nexus between corporations and our government, and they are the vehicle by which the corporations control our government. And if you want to start doing something about you know, the structural problems that the serious structural problems that we have in our political system, I think you have to start by looking at these political parties, because they've really gone a long way to strangle a lot of the democracy out of our system.
You're speaking my language. I look at this stuff almost in game theory. Like you have a system, you have a capitalistic system. That particular system says maximize your profits. Then you have a political system. That political system is based on cash. Who has the most cash? Okay, well, the parties are going to lean based upon who has the most cash. Who is it? Is there an incentive in two parties preventing a third party from coming up? Of course, there's an incentive for those two parties to do that. Yeah, they have a perfect.
I mean, in the world of economics, you know, you see monopolies and duopolies all the time. Okay, antitrust behavior. You know, two, you know, major, for example, like if there's two steel companies, you know, they're going to coordinate their behavior to make sure that no other steel companies enter the market. I mean, this is basic antitrust number one, basic antitrust 101. It's no different in the political realm. Okay, you've got two parties. They've been established for decades, you know, hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And they have control over the means of our voting system. I mean, they run, their officials run our elections, so they're able to do whatever they need to do to ensure that they remain the only two real political parties in town. Okay, and that's a real problem.
I find it to be an amazing thing. Like I give you an example. You have Jill Stein. Jill Stein wants to run. And yet, there's going to be a Republican or a Democrat controlling the political apparatus that a third party is running in. How does that third party member get a fair handle of things? You know what I mean? Right. And then the Democratic Party takes this position of, hey, if you vote for them, the maniac may get in office. So vote for us. We're going to rip you over the coals, but at the very least, we're not a maniac.
Yeah,
and it keeps everybody out.
It's also, you know, I mean, there's so much going on there. I mean, you know, ballot access. I mean, just getting on the ballot in every state is a big deal. And I think, you know, the Green Party only just this year, I think, got on every state ballot. You know, the Libertarian Party was like the first party outside of the Democrats and the Republicans to have gotten in all 50 states in a long, you know, in ages. So, you know, just, you know, that's one hurdle, you know, you have to overcome, and it's very arcane. But then, you know, once you get on there, you're facing, you know, the fact that, you know, this country is branded into two groups, Democrats and Republicans, okay? And there's been so much branding and psychological, you know, well, I mean,
propaganda. I mean, it's been so, you're soaking in this idea of, hey, there are only two parties.
There's only two options. There's only two options on the menu. Okay, everything else is, no, we don't really serve that. Okay, or you don't want to eat that. Okay, that's like, you know, there's two flavors of ice cream, and you know that other stuff that tastes like crap. You don't want, trust me, you don't want to eat that, right?
That other stuff is just fringe. You don't want the fringe. So you make a good point, and I've made this point before myself. There are two corporations. Essentially, the argument that the DNC is making is we're a corporation. We can do whatever we want. If that's the case, shouldn't antitrust lawsuits apply? Like, if we effectively have two corporations, we have a monopoly in regards to our political system. Can antitrust lawsuits be used to break those up? And if so, why not? If not, why not?
Well, antitrust, the Sherman Act was passed in the early 20th century as a way of controlling abuses in the market for goods and services. You know, I don't think, you know, I mean, I don't have the act in front of me, but I think you would have a hard time reading that statute to apply to political parties which are not in the business of providing goods and services, although they do take money. Okay,
that's what I was about to say. They take massive amounts of cash,
which is why I think fraud applies and why I think negligence applies. Also, you know, it's you know, it would be hard to apply. I see what you're saying. I mean, in law, you know, sometimes a good analogy like that doesn't work just because the statute wasn't written broadly enough to apply to the situation in which you want to apply the principle. But I agree. I think, frankly, what I think needs to happen is we need to get to a post-party climate. Okay?
Yes.
In other words, so you know, we don't really, you know, there's if you read political science literature, which I studied in grad school for a couple of years, but I recall there was literature that suggests that because of the way the American system is constructed, it's very, you know, the pressure to form two major parties is just, there's a law of nature that sort of applies to make that a reality.
But why? I mean, I didn't take it. I didn't take political science. My degree was in software. I look at this stuff from a systems standpoint, and for me, it's incentives. So, what's political science's reason for it?
You know, I asked the question. You know, and maybe this is a way of thinking through the answer to your question. But I almost asked the prior questions: what is the purpose of political parties? Why do we even have them? What is it? Why do we have these political parties? I mean, they go back historically to England. And, you know, they come out of the parliamentary tradition in England, and people would sort of congregate according to which views they had. And they would, you know, form blocks, voting blocks based on shared principles. And then that sort of led to, you know, this identity that became the political party. But, you know, as we know, you know, a lot of those platforms are really falsely constructed. I mean, we know that both of these parties are serving one master and one master alone, and that's the corporations. You know, they come up with these platforms that are basically, you know, really just meant to deceive and distract us more than anything.
Yeah, they're not real. They're not real at all. It's Hillary Clinton kept saying we have the most progressive platform, as if anybody was going to do anything about that platform. The platform is often ignored.
Right. I think at one time when political parties they may have served a purpose when, people wanted to know, okay, where does, like think back to, England in the 17th century, 18th century in Parliament, let's say. People want to know where, so-and-so stands on an issue. So they're like, okay, Joe is a Tory. Okay, I'll vote for him because I know the Tories are very conservative on property rights or something. But, in this day and age, information is very freely available about people. You can put up, a Facebook page, a Twitter account, and you can make your views on issues very, very known to a wider audience. So, my view is that, as social media progresses, perhaps the need for political parties won't be there anymore, because people can, make up their minds based on information that's available. Maybe the information can be aggregated or crowdsourced on platforms. Technology can be used. But, we don't need this idea of Democrat or Republican to make up our mind of who to vote for. I think they've outlived their purpose.
No, I agree. It becomes a cultural thing at a certain point. Like,
right.
Because if you look at the voting pattern, there's a schism in our country. Like you would have minorities voting for one particular party, you have whites voting for another party, and you see it over and over and over again. There's a historical context to it, of course, but you definitely see it, and it definitely becomes this. Like I give an example, and African Americans, we vote Democrat by a ridiculous number. Now we do this because of things that happened in the past in regards to the Republican Party. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Like, man, trying to pry an African American away from voting for a Democrat is a difficult task. It is a mentally difficult task.
I think you when you said, it's become
it's cultural.
A cultural thing. I think you hit it on the head, and I think it's become that because it's an easy way to control people. Okay, is to create false identities and then create expectations based on what those identities are supposed to do. So you give the example, and it's one of many examples that you can point to, but the tradition of African Americans voting Democrat. There's a clip on YouTube. I'd encourage people to check it out. It's Malcolm X in 1964. He's addressing an audience in Cleveland, and he talks about how the Democratic Party, I think he calls it a sham, or very memorably he says to the crowd, he says, "You put them first, and they're putting you last."
Yeah.
Okay. And then, he goes on to give his interpretation of LBJ and the Civil Rights Act, and, how, basically this is all theater meant to deceive people. And, the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, I think that is essentially, they become more cultural identities than anything else, and cultural identities that can be manipulated and leveraged in order to control people's behavior.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that the government controls us.
It's pretty amazing, actually. And I'm gonna get back to the case. I find this part absolutely fascinating. It's like you would talk to somebody, the person will be a Republican, and you would say, the Republican would say in office, "I believe that we should have fiscal responsibility." All right. Now, the person will say, "I believe we should have fiscal responsibility." And they said, "Well, explain to me why they increased the budget by $9 trillion immediately after they took over." "Well, I mean, we had things to do." Wait a minute, you can't have it both ways. Either you're being massively disingenuous, or it's like this cultural identity thing where it's hard to pry people away from it. Is saying, just look at the reality. Yeah. Just look at the reality of what you're voting for. When is the next time you guys are going to be in court?
That is unknown at this time. We're waiting on the court to issue its order on the DNC's second motion to dismiss, and at this point, we don't have a timeline.
So the DNC is essentially putting up every roadblock they can. We want to dismiss this as soon as possible.
Yeah, no, they filed a motion to dismiss for failure to serve process. That was their first motion, which because they certainly didn't want any of these issues to be heard during the election. I think that was their initial fear. So they filed that the first motion to dismiss. Now they're filing a second motion to dismiss. So they definitely do not want to get to the discovery phase on this case.
Are you confident about this? I mean, like when everything's aside, 3 a.m, when your day is wearing off you and everything else, and you're just alone by yourself. Are you confident in the sense of this, at the very least, moving to an actual trial?
Boy, that's a really that's a really interesting question, because I am increasingly so worried about the political situation in this country that the DNC case, what worries me is that this case is only the tip of the iceberg, and there's so much more just beneath the DNC. And in terms of the case itself, I mean, so many things could happen before we see a trial in this case. I think it would be great if we had a trial. I think it's something that would be very, very helpful and healthy for this country. But I can't say sitting here today that I'm necessarily confident that we're going to see that.
Do you think the political situation influences the judicial situation?
Oh yeah, I mean there's no question that the judicial system is part of our political system, and they're very much intertwined. So it's very hard to separate them. Really?
So you think the case itself will be somehow influenced by the politics of the case? Meaning,
no, I don't necessarily. No, I don't necessarily think that. I didn't mean to suggest that. The case will. I'm confident the case is going to be decided on the basis of the facts and the law. Okay. But in terms of the judicial system in this country, I think that the judicial system is very much influenced by the political system, and you just have to look at the Supreme Court to know that. There's a very, very prominent judge by the name of Richard Posner, who's on the Seventh Circuit of Appeal in Illinois, just came out in an article today, just really, putting it out there, just how, that in his view, our judicial system is in really, really dire condition. So, wow. From the legal perspective, there's a lot going on in the legal system that's very concerning, and I think it, ties into, a lot of the issues that we're seeing in politics right now.
That's interesting. Like I know on the level of the Supreme Court that, look, it's up for grabs. I know people like to think that the Supreme Court is this last bastion of honesty in America. It's not. They put their people in. How these guys are going to vote based upon who put them in office. Meaning the law can be just manipulated and twisted and everything else. It's not
right.
Clear.
That's what, and we're at the point now where it's not me saying it as a lawyer. It's Richard Posner, who's a federal appellate judge in Illinois, one of the most respected jurists of all time, and he's going on the record saying that the Supreme Court is too political and that the system is in bad shape. That's really bad.
It is. I mean, but it's obvious. Like it was one of those things where, to me, it was obvious going back like 20 some years. Like it's, you look at the court, a case comes up. Okay, how many conservative judges do we have? How many liberal judges do we have? Well, there's your answer. Now, right. The interesting part to this is why they fought so hard. I mean, put it this way: the Democratic argument is always, hey, at the very least, you may think this candidate is horrible. You may think this candidate is status quo. You may think this candidate is not going to get anything done. But at the very least, they'll put somebody on the Supreme Court that's not crazy. If the Supreme Court was an honest court, that wouldn't be an argument. That wouldn't be an argument. Like it's like I'm always, like I said, man, there's a little part of me that's not cynical, that wishes for the best, that hopes that my cynicism is just unfounded completely, and thinks to myself, this is how it should be, regardless of how it functions. This is how it should be.
Right.
I'm sometimes shocked that people are okay with it. Like it's for example, even the fraud lawsuit. You say, well, look, they cheated this guy. People sent money to him thinking that it was going to be a fair process. And you have many people saying, yeah, dude, that's just politics. Why is that just politics? Why is that just politics? And should we have a conversation about whether that should be politics?
I think you're getting to something that, and this is, I think this is a refreshing point that you make because, I mean, I'm just going to come out and say it. I think
the king has no clothes. Do you think?
I'm just going to come out and say it. On the progressive side, progressives are, because, and I consider myself a progressive, and sort of built into the concept of progressivism is hope, right? You're looking to the future. You're trying to advance policies that are going to make things better for the next generation, certainly your generation as you grow older, but also, you want your kids and their kids and so forth to have a better life, right? And so that's why we support universal health care. And that's why, we take climate change so seriously and, the environment so seriously. And it's why, we like things like basic income or universal incomes, those types of things, because we're talking about progress. But the issue is that you can't even get to point A on any of that stuff unless you have a system that works and functions like it's supposed to. And when you have a system which is so corrupt and everybody knows it's corrupt, and they say, well, that's just how politics is, and money in politics. Well, this is just corruption. Well, you don't have a viable system to work with. And so you can't be looking towards the future. You've got to be looking to the now and the past, okay, in terms of what's went wrong and who's responsible for it and how did guy get those people out of power. Because that's the only way you're going to build a foundation for progressive policies. And I think a lot of progressives just have trouble with that concept because it requires them to shift gears and focus on how to fix what's immediately wrong, which, isn't necessarily going to get you, in the short term, universal health care. Okay. I mean, but this is why all this stuff about Awan Brothers and Debbie Wasserman Schultz and what's going on, in the Judiciary Committee and the investigations of the DNC that are going on right now, in addition to our lawsuit, that's why people have to really be paying attention to that stuff.
I agree. No, I agree. It just amazes me, man. I don't understand why. I think people look at politics in the way that you said it earlier, where they don't have this idea that politics is that corrupt. Like they look at it as this kind of childlike, oh, this particular guy has these values that this guy is espousing. This guy is having this ideological fight in Washington, and I'm putting my vote behind this particular ideology, and somebody else is putting their vote behind another, not realizing that it's corrupt. It's not an honest process. Like you putting your vote behind somebody is not necessarily getting you what you think you're getting out of that vote.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's because corruption exists by, through misinformation and brainwashing.
Yeah.
In other words, you have to keep the people in the dark. And that's been done very, very effectively by our mass media for decades upon decades upon decades. Okay. And so that's why people think like that.
How do you challenge this through law? Like, so let's say, okay, so antitrust, let's say that doesn't work. Let's say we can't find a clever argument for antitrust for these two parties. What's the solution? Is there a legal solution? I always make this point of, is there a legal solution to the issue? Meaning, can you challenge this in court in a way that says, yeah, this is not the way politics, or this is not the way government is supposed to run?
No, that's a great question. The legal solution to corruption is prosecution, widespread prosecution.
How do you do it? Like, how do you get? Is that something that a citizen can do in that sense, or is that something that must be done through law.
Yeah, well, you have to put pressure on the current administration to prosecute for corruption. I mean, that's what we have to do. We have to demand it. I mean, prosecutors bring cases in the name of the people. We are the people, so we have to demand that we have to put as much pressure on the prosecution as possible to prosecute the wrongdoers. And so, we have action on, Capitol Hill. I mean, you've got, they're ordering investigations, but you can see it's a very long process. And, that's why, and legal solutions, by the way, typically take forever. And I don't know how much time we have here. I mean,
you have as much time as you want. I typically run
no,
for 2 hours,
I'm not saying on your show. I'm saying how much time we have as a society. To fix the problem of rampant corruption, because I think it's gone past, in terms of the system. I personally think it's gone past the breaking point. But I think we need prosecutions.
I agree. Oh man, I have qualms with this. So the question becomes: do you trust Jeff Sessions and Donald Trump to prosecute the DNC honestly? Now, early on, I was like, oh man, it feels like a banana court to do so. The more I think about it, I don't think it's a banana court. I'm on the lock of my bandwagon. And I'm on this bandwagon for a very specific point. Not because I want him to go specifically after Hillary Clinton. I want him to investigate the DNC. I think there was massive rampant corruption in what took place in that primaries. Now, the beauty of it, the justice, what was it? It was a justice area of government. I can't think of the specific thing, but they sent a list saying we want to prosecute all these issues. And one of the issues was we want to investigate what took place in regards to the DNC and the cheating of Bernie Sanders. So
I saw
maybe,
that.
yeah. So maybe
I thought that was good. That's a good question. What do you? I mean, I trust no one. I will say that. The powers. Let's call them the powers that be. The powers that be. Their optimal solution to all this would be to prosecute as few people as possible that'll make the people happy and they'll just forget. Okay. So that, in other words, scapegoating, right? You throw out the one or two out there and say, okay, we're going to go after this person and this person. And then, that's it, and we'll, I think we have to demand, when we say prosecutions, I think we're talking prosecutions all the way to the top. All the way to the top. I think, I mean, for example, look at this Awan brother who just got arrested, right? I mean, look how this thing's already gotten so drawn out. In terms of, I mean, I know it just hit the mainstream media now. I mean, the right wing was reporting about it like 6 months ago. It's a long-standing investigation, and he's been charged with bank fraud, but we know there's something much deeper going on there. But he's just like a bit player in all of this. Mm-hmm. I mean, he is, he's low level. He's the IT guy. Okay.
Yeah. Do you think they're going to work their way up? I mean, meaning
I think they need to work their way up. That's what I'm saying. I think in terms of the legal solution to corruption, I mean, this has to be, a purge to the very top, because the problems in our government are so deep beyond just like, I mean, election rigging is just the start of it.
There was something that I saw that was interesting to me. So at one point you asked for protection from the court itself. What was the court's response, and why did you ask for protection?
Well, we had received a series of disturbing. I mean, in addition to having 2 witnesses die in this case, one murdered, one under what's I think are suspicious circumstances that are not fully explained. That, of course, being Seth Rich, and then our process server, Sean Lucas. And then we started getting threats from people who were, my co-counsel Cullen got a call from somebody who referenced Barrington Wiseman, who was a attorney down here who washed up dead on Hollywood Beach. We had gotten at the time we wrote the motion a strange a call that appeared to originate with Debbie Wasserman Schultz's office in Aventura, Florida, that used what appeared to be some type of voice changing technology. So we felt it had gotten to the point where we had to bring it to the court's attention, what was going on. And, given, the deaths of two witnesses in a federal lawsuit, we felt it was our obligation to at least ask for some type of order in the nature of protection. And the court's response, and I think, when you think about it, it makes sense, was that it just simply doesn't have the resources at its disposal to provide protection in a case like this, because, you have so many class members and plaintiffs involved, not to mention the lawyers and the witnesses, and their staff and so forth. So and I mean, I think the court said, they would take the entire U.S. Marshals Service to deal, with the issues involved in protecting, so many people.
I see. So it wasn't so much. Okay, so it wasn't so much we disbelieve what's taking place, meaning the court is not saying we disbelieve that there's an issue here. We disbelieve that there is weirdness in the number of deaths that's taking place in regards to this particular case. Their issue was there's no way we can do it. Absolutely.
Right. I mean, and you have to, just bear in mind, I mean, there's only one agency that is charged with providing protection in issues involving the federal courts, and that's the U.S. Marshals Service. So it really, of all the branches of government, I would say the judiciary certainly has the least amount of resources at its disposal.
I see. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. I saw it and I thought to myself, well, yeah, that is weird that there were these deaths associated with the trial. And I was curious about how the judge reacted to that. I mean, that's a pretty startling thing when you come and say, hey, people are dying with suspicious causes. People who could be witnesses at our particular trial. We want protection. This looks a little weird to us. This looks a little strange. We don't want to take any chances. I can understand that. I can totally understand that. If you had to make one main argument for your detractors, because you have detractors, I find that it's odd to have detractors in something like this. I understand it from the standpoint of people who are diehard Democrats and they're like, we don't want to talk about this. There's nothing to see here. I get it from them. But before we answer that point, or before we get to that point, the alt-right. Now, the alt-right may have different reasons for liking this case. Let's say the Republicans also may have different reasons for liking this case. Mm-hmm. But it's not crazy to join hands on this one, right? I mean, you look at this, you yourself have said, why are we having labels in this situation? Is that, I guess I'm asking, there's been a kerfuffle. I'm going to call it kerfuffle on the left.
Yes.
That I find to be absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, no, I've been following that.
I'm sorry you've had to follow that.
No,
I really am.
Well, I think it's a discussion that needs to happen. And discussions are good. They should be happening. Even when they get contentious, there's a lot going on. So I think I'm a big fan, of just kind of like having like a vigorous discussion. And yeah, people's feelings are getting hurt, but I think the situation in this country is so bad that the least of our concerns should be hurt feelings, quite honestly. But I will say this is my understanding of this discussion. I mean, I think the issue has been sort of framed as, should the alt-left collaborate with the alt-right in certain circumstances? And, there's the side that says, well, there, look, we can, as you put it, join hands on some issues, or there may be some causes that we have in common, and perhaps we should, collaborate. And then there's the side that says, to do so just, ignores the entire history of the alt-right, in terms of racism, misogyny, what have you. And, that's, just not, should never be acceptable under any circumstances as a categorical rule. My thought on that is that, I think maybe the issue could be framed differently. And I think part of the problem is we're so divided in this country around labels like Republican, Democrat, alt-left, alt-right, that sometimes we don't see things from the other's perspectives as often as we should. The alt-right has had a long history on issues that I think are starting to come to the progressive discussion only recently. And so, in a way, the way I see it is, not so much like an issue of collaboration, but more of an issue of perhaps learning from our fellow Americans who have dealt with similar issues in their own experience, or, for example, have been tuned into the corruption of Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation for much longer than we have, right? I mean, that's sort of something that has come into the progressive discussion only recently, is, just the enormous corruption, because, it's part of the discussion about the rigged primaries, right? It's the Clinton machine in action, and we got crushed by that machine, so to speak, in 2016. Well, guess what? The folks on the right have been, have been observing this Clinton machine in action for a long time. Okay, and so our experience fits in with their narrative at that point. Okay, their experience. And so, I feel like it's not so much an issue of collaboration as it is an issue of, finding issues of commonality and learning from, and not being able to expand our audience to include people who we may be talking about the same things with. Okay, because that's gonna augment our power. Okay. I mean, I think that, when we say collaboration, that kind of has a different meaning to me that, I think is a little bit, I think it's just a little bit of a simplistic way of talking about it. It's not so much collaboration. It's more like, just having a broader discussion with more people in it. And sort of around certain topics, because I got to say, I follow a lot of people on the alt-left and the alt-right, and they're saying a lot of the same things right now about things like Seth Rich and A1 Brothers and so forth. So it seems to me that the discussion is broadening of its own accord. So there may be an opportunity here to learn from each other.
The broadening discussion, though, you'd agree that some of this came from this bitterness associated with the primaries, like this recognition of sorts of like, holy shit, we were cheated. And then you're looking at it with a skeptical eye, as opposed to looking at it from the standpoint of this tribalism of, I'm a part of this tribe. It's no longer, I'm a part of this tribe. I'm outside of this tribe. I have no affiliation with this tribe, and I'm seeing corruption.
Right.
I mean, I would say that's a shared interest.
Right. And it's maybe it's easier to see corruption when the corruption isn't, affecting your vicinity. But when it crushes you, or when you get stomped on, you feel that. Yeah. And then but see, the people outside, they've been seeing what's going on for longer than you. Okay.
Yeah, it's visceral. I mean, it's like explaining this idea of why people give up their morals. Like, so a government can say, yeah, it's a bad idea for you to kill people and hurt people and do all these other things while you're in the country, but if we commission you to do this, it's perfectly okay because you're doing it for your government, so you can murder people abroad. Immorality in the government itself is, for the most part, given a pass if people think they're part of that government. So they turn a blind eye to the things our government does. Nazis didn't necessarily consider themselves Nazis from the standpoint of the way we consider themselves as Nazis. They were part of a government. They looked at it as, we're doing what our government told us to do. Once you're outside that bubble, man, it's a different animal. When you're outside the bubble, meaning I'm not a Democrat, I'm a progressive. Whatever that label means. I mean, that label doesn't really, I would make the case that these labels are slippery at best. But once you're outside of the bubble and you label yourself, you consider yourself and define yourself as something completely different, it's a different animal. Your view is different. Yeah. I'm agreeing with you on this. I think progressives, once they fell out the bubble and they felt crushed by, like you said, a clean machine, the alt-right has been screaming about this. Yeah. And progressives are like, holy shit, we just got smashed by this. That's now, it's not so much that they looked at anything from the alt-right. It just so happened they saw it for themselves and just agrees. It's an amazing thing. Like when there's such thing as shared interest. You know what I mean? It's like I'm talking about this and they're talking about this. And no, we're not necessarily talking about it together. Yes, we were both talking about it.
Right.
We're both talking about it.
Right.
What are the things in the trial that you're concerned about? Like as the trial goes on, what are the things that keep you up at night? Keep you up at night may be strong. I'm putting it in stark, epic terms. What are the things that bug you and eat at you at 2 and 3 in the morning about the case?
Yeah, I mean, I got to tell you, the things that really bug me about the case. Well, right now, the thing that's bugging me the most that's related to the case is, I want to know what happened to Seth Rich.
I think everyone does, or at the very least, progressives and all right, or whatever they want to call themselves. Yeah, a lot of people do.
I mean, regardless of whether or not he, was the leaker, and a report just came out today. I don't know if you saw it, Jamarl, but it's supposedly an audio recording from Seymour Hersh, which says that he had access to an FBI document, which shows that Seth Rich had emails with WikiLeaks and had provided them with the WikiLeaks documents. He was a leaker. Now, and Hersh is, he's a pretty big deal. I mean, he's a very
Seymour Hersh is amazing.
Right.
I mean, Seymour Hersh came out with the thing saying about oh God, that man is amazing.
Yeah.
The canisters from the Syrian sarin gas thing. He was like, look, that wasn't from the government itself. Here's the evidence that shows it's from the rebels. Yeah. He did another thing on the Osama bin Laden thing, saying, no, it wasn't this, spying thing. Somebody came to the Pentagon and said, hey, we have Osama bin Laden. And for the most part, it was a hit.
Yeah.
Seymour Hersh is amazing.
Yeah, for definitely somebody who has good sources. So to hear this recording that's, of him saying that Seth Rich was a leaker, I mean, that's a pretty big deal.
That is a big deal.
It's a huge deal. And it goes beyond the lawsuit. I mean, it basically turns the entire Russian narrative upside down, because now, there's no way anymore to pin the results on the Russians. And so basically what the Democratic Party has been doing for the last however many months has been wasting our time with an entirely false narrative
and a complicit media.
Yeah, and I don't know how they're going to put the genie back in that bottle. I mean, when you think about it, I mean,
they're going to ignore it. I think they're going to ignore it. When Seymour Hersh came out about the Syrian thing, saying, look, it wasn't the Syrian government, they completely ignored that story. Do you know he had to publish that story in Germany because they wouldn't publish it in the United States?
Yeah, I just think at this point, though, they're losing enough people that they're skirting with viability as an organization. And I say that because I think people need to start paying very close attention to the financials of the DNC, how much donations they're taking in, how much debt they have. It's been very, very low. It's compared to the RNC, they're doing terribly. and you know, they have bills to pay, you know, expensive bills, and you know, if they're going to, you know, be a viable political party, they need to make those numbers go up, and they need to make those numbers go soon. Otherwise, you know, they really are skirting with viability. So, you know, that's, to me, that's like the more, you know, apart from the trial, that's actually the more interesting issue to me is whether they are going, you know, they're going to lose viability as an entity in the near future.
For the moment, let's stay with the Seth Rich thing. The narrative, the narrative that the mainstream media has been putting out for 7 to 8 months. It was Russia. Russia hacked us. Hillary Clinton said Russia hacked us, so clearly Russia hacked us. And
Right.
there's an assessment. No, they never saw the FBI files. No, the DNC never gave up the servers to the organization of our particular country that does investigation. Nope, they gave it to somebody, to CrowdStrike. But for 7 months, it's a hack. It's Russia hacked us. Now, there's a thing that came out, what is it called? Investigative professionals, veterans investigative professionals, that said physically it is impossible for it to be a hack. It had to have been a leak. There's no way for them to download at those speeds.
Right.
Mind-blowing. Now, if we're combining that with the Seth Rich thing, and they've tried to scream at the top of their lungs, mainstream media, if you say that Seth Rich had anything to do with it, and it was anything other than Russia hacking us, then you're a conspiracy theorist. I find that narrative to be completely ridiculous. It's like, certainly you realize that Seth could have been a leaker. It's like, not saying that he was. So don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that Seth Rich did it or didn't do it. I make this point of, I'm ambiguous. I don't understand why they're so dead certain. That seems weird to me.
Well, and it's obvious that the investigation of that murder is at a standstill. I mean, there's no, you know, they're not releasing. I mean, you don't. If it was a botched robbery, you would have released, you know, at least footage right now, or a description of the suspects, or, you know, there's none of that. No video. Come on, this is the day and age where everything has a camera.
It's video.
I mean, come on. So it's obvious there's someone blocking that investigation. You know, I know you had a interview with Rod Wheeler, which was, you know, an excellent interview. I remember watching that, one of the better pieces of information that you can find out there on the Seth Rich stuff. But you know, Rod Wheeler was in the news today because he sued you know, Fox for defamation. But it's very, very interesting because you know, truth is a defense to defamation under the law. So who knows? Maybe we will get answers in that case. But in any event, you know, there's obviously a cover up there. Obviously.
Now you've added Seth. Okay, that's interesting. Early on, you said there were several deaths that were associated with the case. You included Seth Rich as being one of the deaths associated with the case. So you believe that he is associated with it,
right? Because you know, if Seth Rich had not been murdered, he would have certainly been listed on our Rule 26 witness disclosures, which in a federal litigation, each side has to provide at the start of discovery, you know, who your potential witnesses are. And, you know, given his position with the DNC, he would have been on that list. So he was a witness.
Now, just to be clear, you're not saying that the DNC knocked Seth Rich off. Like, you're not saying that Hillary Clinton played goons to go after Seth Rich. Or are you saying that? I mean, I'm not assuming one way or the other. I'm just asking the question in the sense of
I have no idea what happened to Seth Rich, other than that, you know, the reports that we have are that he was murdered. But, you know, there are gaps in the investigation that are unusual from a legal perspective. You would expect at this point to have some footage to look at. You would expect to have some kind of description of the subjects. You would expect, you know, in a $500,000 worth of reward money is on the table at this point, or maybe even more at this point. If it was a botched robbery, you know, that would have gotten, you know, that would have smoked someone out by now. Come on. I mean, let's use our common sense. let's see, nothing was taken off of him. You start to, come on. I mean, it becomes an insult to the intelligence at some point to suggest that there isn't something about his murder that we don't know that is very, very significant and that is kept from us. What that is, I have no idea.
Fair enough. Is there something that you yourself want to say? Do you have time for questions? This is going to be the last question.
Yeah, no, sure, absolutely.
Is there something that you may want to say that I haven't asked? I've tried to think of everything that was associated with the case, tangential to the case, or anything else. But is there something that you yourself, hey, it may be to your detractors, it may be to people who are disinterested, or just a general statement?
Yeah, I would like to. Yeah, that's a good question. So I think, right now, I would just emphasize that on the progressive side, I think it's important to pay attention to what's going on with the Awan brothers situation and to follow that closely.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah,
fair enough.
I think because I'll just say it again. As progressives, I consider myself a progressive, but, we're not going to be able to get anywhere on any progressive agenda item unless and until we clean up the extraordinary corruption that is in our government. And we have to come to grips with that as progressives. And I think we have to put priority on that. And, the fortunate thing is we have a window here because Trump is in office and the GOP is in control. And so we can put pressure on them to actually do it. Had Hillary Clinton gotten elected, this would be an impossibility. So we have to take advantage of this. This window may be closing. They're trying to close this window. Okay. They're trying, they are doing everything they can they tried everything they can and are still trying to get Trump out of office, and they will try everything to see that he doesn't have another term. Okay. So there's not a huge window when it comes to prosecutions here. So in terms of prioritizing, I think this should be the priority.
That's fair. That's fair. And I can understand where you're coming from. I looked at Trump being elected as, it's funny. When Trump got elected, I voted for Jill Stein. I couldn't get over the hurdle of you cheated my guy and you want me to vote for you after you cheated my guy. It is something gross about that in regards to how democracy should function. Yes, I'm cynical, but again, I have this little childlike part of me that believes we have democracy. We should adhere to the ideas of a democracy. So I agree with you. How do you do that? That's a fair question. It's like, how do you? Trump has been screaming about Jeff Sessions to look at something other than himself. Meaning he's been like, hey, we shouldn't investigate Hillary. Hey, why aren't you investigating Hillary? Hey, the Clinton Foundation needs to be investigated. The president is screaming, investigate somebody other than me.
So I think I have a little bit of a read on Trump. I don't know how many progressives know that my wife and I were involved in litigation against him on behalf of real estate investors in South Florida for several.
Really?
Yes, and we actually had 2 trials against Donald Trump, and I deposed him, and my wife deposed him. So we've gotten to know him very well. I think you have to. I think, it's how you put pressure on anyone. You have to show that you're in favor of it and loudly demand it. And, if you're on social media, you should pay close attention to that issue. You should support, independent media that are, actually talking about that kind of stuff, working against the mainstream media blackout. Okay. That's what you should be doing, because the media is really the only barrier to that happening. And, in my opinion, one of the good things that Trump has been doing in his administration. I mean, I'm certainly not in favor of everything he's been doing, but
Yeah,
one of
absolutely.
the good things he's been doing is the war on the mainstream media. I think he's been making them look ridiculous. I think he's been distracting them, wasting their time with stupid issues about his tweets and his spokespeople. I think that's all distraction. And I think that I think he is very sensitive to social media. That's one of the reasons that he actually was able to get elected. He used Twitter masterfully, first presidential candidate to do that. I think he's very sensitive to what people are demanding on social media and in independent media. He has a tradition of that. So I think if you loudly demand it, he will make that the focus of what his administration's doing. And, quite honestly, from the perspective point of view, I think it's better that he be doing that than other things.
Agreed. No, agreed. Trump is a gambit, man. I felt during the elections, I looked at Trump as a gambit. It's like, all right, this guy's a wild card, but nothing takes place with Hillary Clinton in that office. That's what I felt. I felt we're going to hit a roadblock. I think we're going to hit a cliff, and something needs to be done. It's this kind of common thing of, I don't know what he's going to do in that office, but I know if the other person gets in that office, she's going to maybe start a war. B, I suspect reinvigorate the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And it's like, do I want the leftist party in this country doing right-wing things? Mm-hmm. And if the leftist party is going to be doing right-wing things, why am I voting for that particular party? It's like, I need that party to fail and burn before that party changes to anything else. And so you get Trump, you know what I mean? Then it becomes, all right, what is Trump going to do in that office? And Trump, for the most part, has been a bumbling buffoon doing a few things right. I mean, the Trans-Pacific Partnership was right. I agree. Yep. Get our people out of Syria. We have no business in Syria. So good on him. I don't like the other stuff, but I agree with you on the media thing. It's making them look ridiculous because nobody's buying the Russia thing. It's like when you look at the polls, people look at it and say, he may have did something, he may not have. This isn't important to me.
Right.
And they go on with their lives. All right, so I'm going to open this up to questions. If you guys have any questions for Jared, I try to do a comprehensive interview. Forgive my failings if I missed something, but I tried to do a comprehensive interview. If you guys have questions, feel free. Miss Thomas has just walked in, but I don't think Miss Thomas is guarding the test thing, the question thing. Yes, mainstream media is a failure. Rhonda Gray, I agree with you. I perfectly agree with you. The goal of the media, and just in general, just a philosophical goal of the media. People often hear me say, what is the philosophical basis of a particular thing? The philosophical basis of the media is hold government accountable. The main reason you have a media is because this idea of government is going to be doing things. In order to pay attention to what your government is doing, you have a media. Well, if you don't have media doing that, it's like...
I have a thought on that.
Go for it.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. The First Amendment talks about speaks of a free press. It doesn't talk about a media, and that's because media is actually a recent creation, and it comes from I date it to radio, beginning of radio and television, but the ability to shape people's beliefs and to manipulate them psychologically at a very, very precise level really only came to being in the television age. And I think it was honed to perfection in the age of cable news, okay, where you have, 2 or 3 or more competing, cable networks that are devoted to one tribe or the other, okay? Either, you're the Fox or you're the CNN or the MSNBC or what have you, right? And the manipulation is carried forth through the media. Now, so what you say when you say, well, what's the role of the media? Well, no, the role of the free press was to enable the freedom of expression. What the role of the media has become in our society, from a realistic perspective, is a tool for manipulation by the government and those who control it.
That's true.
And so what we should be focusing on is eliminating the media's control, breaking the media's control. Okay, which is why, again, independent media is so important. Social media, to the extent that we can avoid the ways in which social media is controlled, is so important. But that's part of the struggle that we're fighting.
Agreed. I agree with that. I think it's worse than. I think it's slightly worse. Think back to before mainstream media, before MSNBC and Fox, you had, what is it called, Operation Mockingbird. The CIA essentially paying off all these people in all these levels of government and media and academia to take on certain narratives to shape public opinion.
Oh yeah, I mean, the CIA and the media have worked hand in glove in this country for a long time, and that's how government power has been exercised. And what people need to realize, and this is also something I want to suggest that progressives start to do, if they haven't done so already, is start to learn the real history of this country.
Yes.
All right.
I'm sorry.
The history that you're not taught in schools. Okay.
Howard's in. He's a master at it. Yes.
Right. But learn that, in 1963, there was a military coup in this country. Okay. There was a military governmental coup when JFK was shot. Okay. That is established by historical record. It's not something that people want to admit or want to talk about even now, really, although everybody sort of knows it to be the truth. Okay. But this American public was deceived, okay, from, the moment that coup took place. And they were led to believe that it was a lone gunman by the Warren Commission. Okay.
And it made no sense. That made no sense. It's like if you could have taken the best sniper on the planet and put him up there at that particular point, he would have never been able to make that shot.
Well, I mean, Jamarl, they kill the guy while he's in custody. A mobster comes over and just comes out of the garage and shoots the guy, okay, who supposedly did it. And he actually said before that he was the patsy. He was telling the truth, okay? He was the patsy in a CIA coordinated plot. Okay, I can recommend 6 books that lay out why this was. This should be common knowledge, commonly accepted, and we need to come to grips with the fact that, a coup took place in 1963.
I look at this stuff with ambiguity. Like I always get. It always trips me out that people will be so certain about their narratives. And I'm not talking about you here. I'm talking about mainstream, like what they would consider to be, this is the official narrative of what happened. Anything beyond the official narrative is conspiracy theory. Mm-hmm. And you start making this point that how do you know that anything outside yourself exists in the way that it does? Somebody writes a narrative on a paper. Somebody writes a book. Somebody writes an article. Somebody does something and somebody says, hey, this is complete truth and this is the utter absolute truth. It's like, how do you know? How do you know? Now, the JFK thing is fascinating to me because the narrative that they go by is a narrative that makes no sense. You have a magic bullet that dances in the air and hits 2 people. Right. Now, that's pretty fascinating. And that says physics can go F itself. It doesn't matter, though. That's the main official narrative. Like, that's what people go by when they say this is what took place. Yeah, but there's no doubt.
When you put together, a number of lawyers, high government officials, you craft the war. I mean, these were the best jurists in the country, okay? And they put together a huge report that, purported to, absolve the government of any liability for the shooting by putting everything on Lee Harvey Oswald. And there's just been so much research that's been done to show what was left out. And I mean, I don't think there's been an event in American history that's been more actually closely studied at a historical level than the Kennedy assassination, because there are all these dedicated researchers out there, and there's a whole body of work out there. And it's eye-opening, but it's something that we as a country need to come to grips with, because it's never been acknowledged in our history that there was a coup in 1963.
But you understand that stuff is hidden. I mean, like, one of the things that mainstream media has that they do relatively well. I mean, it's well if you don't look at it, look at anything else. Narratives. It's like, this is what reality is. It's like, well, wait a minute. Why do you guys accept that this is what reality is? Because that media told me that this is what reality is. Mm-hmm. Like, they don't question the integrity of it. I give you an example. Obama comes out. We killed bin Laden. Holy shit, we killed bin Laden. That's amazing. Well, we had our dedicated people going out and we doing X, Y, Z and everything else. And the media says, well, the government says that they did X, Y, Z and this took place. It's like, why are you just accepting the government's narrative of what took place? What's your job? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's like, why? Certainly the government has an incentive structure to make sure that they have the best narrative that they can possibly make. And then you start finding the narrative changes. Well, like, wait a minute. Why is the government changing their story? The media, again, uncritical, unconcerned, we still take the government at their word.
Yeah. But again, you're this is again the phenomenon of media. Media has always existed as the mouthpiece of government. So it's their job not to purport the truth, but to report the government narrative that absolves the government of any responsibility. If we're talking about the Kennedy assassination. Well,
and that's the secret. It's like, the media always takes a position that whatever the United States does, the United States is right. Right. But the media will also say we're separate and distinct from the government itself. So yes, you can trust us because we're independent. It's like, you're not. Right. I'm sorry, man. No. When Jake Tapper is on having a conversation with Tulsi Gabbard, and Tulsi Gabbard comes out and says, we're paying terrorists to kill, we're paying terrorists to undermine the government. And Jake Tapper could barely get the words out. Oh, the government says that's not true. Wait a minute, Jake Tapper. What's your job? Is your job to report the evidence? Somebody who just went over there, who's telling you the information. Is your job to report the evidence, or is your job to just repeat what the government said?
Yeah. Well, it's amazing. But here, here's the thing. You and I are having this discussion now. We're speaking very openly, critically of the government, and we're allowed to have that discussion precisely because of the First Amendment. But the First Amendment also allows huge corporations to try to hypnotize everyone with their message. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, it's not quite the same as the Soviet Union, for example, when, back in the day, you couldn't speak the truth about your government, right? Because you'd be locked up by the KGB and never heard from again, because your neighbors would say, so-and-so said that, this or that, and, you're hauled away. We don't have that model, but what we do have is a model where, the truth is suppressed because of mass hypnosis by the corporations. We can talk about the truth till we're blue in the face, but it may or may not matter in the course of, what political outcomes. That's what's going on.
I would hope that the more this idea of citizen journalism, and citizen journalism has its issues. Don't misunderstand me. You have people who come on and say all sorts of things, but it's, when you look at the number of people who watch mainstream media, that number goes down dramatically, and what you see is a rise in people who are using the internet for their information.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's the interesting thing. The internet changed the rules of the game very suddenly. The internet look, what we call the internet or the digital age or the mobile age, whatever you want to call it, it has a habit of disrupting things very suddenly. So, look what Uber did to the taxi industry, right? Yeah. When the internet first came out, I remember when I was in college, I purchased my airplane ticket from maybe the last travel agency that was, one of the, a travel agent that you actually walked into and you didn't buy flights online, right?
Right.
But like that was the beginning of orbits, and now the whole travel agency, the whole industry for travel agents just changed overnight. Okay, the book industry. Okay, just think about it. Movies, how we watch movies, consume movies, how we find it. So because of that, the government may be contending with issues that it didn't necessarily expect when certain policies were enacted.
Yeah, that's fair. Somebody asks, they say, how long is it normal for something to take this long in regards to the court process? Like, this idea of the, like, is it taking longer than what it should, or is it taking longer than what it normally would take?
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say that there's a lot of issues in front of the judge. I think the most important thing, look, whatever way the order goes, I think the order is going to be very, very important, because we're going to learn what rights we have as participants in the political process. Okay, so if you choose to participate in a political campaign, and you believe that you live in a democracy, and that you have rights, well, you're going to find out what rights you have.
Wait, right there, that's fascinating. Yeah, that's fascinating, because at that point it becomes canon, right? It becomes this thing of, this is the legal precedent that was set by this particular case.
Right. And by the way, we've already learned something very, very important in this case that I didn't know before, which is that the DNC believes that it has the right to pick the candidate however way it wants. I didn't know that. I believed that the DNC didn't have that right. Why else would it say so in its charter? I mean, it's the litigation process has a way of getting to the truth of the matter, and sometimes even in unexpected ways. In this case, we've already learned something that I think is very, very important for the people of this country to know.
Would you say that's the most important revelation that you've come out so far?
From a legal standpoint, absolutely. I think it's something that, and it's very interesting that the mainstream media avoids talking about it, because if it reported on the lawsuit, it would have to present that proposition to the public, which is that the DNC takes the position in the court of law that it has no obligation to run the primaries in a fair and even-handed manner. So that goes right to the media's bottom line. Not only are you not going to give money to the primaries because you know that they're rigged, but you're not going to want to tune into them watch the coverage of the primaries because you already know the outcome. So they're going to lose money.
Would you have given $200 to Bernie Sanders if you knew Bernie Sanders, the fix was already in?
Would you?
But that's my point. That's what I'm getting at. It's like it's like the question of fraud always is funny to me, because that seems to be what it turns on. It's like, would you have given money to Bernie Sanders if you knew that Bernie Sanders was going to lose? Like, if you knew that they were lying to you about having a fair contest?
I don't think anyone would.
Nobody in their right mind would.
No, people don't just give money for no reason. This is how people are told that they participate in political campaigns, by donating to the candidates. And they believe that those donations are going to help them win in a fair election. It's very simple.
I agree. No, I agree. It's funny. I looked at the DNC as being a corporation, and that corporation can do whatever it wants. But back in the, was it 60s, they chose somebody to run, but they just plucked the guy out of a hat. Like, either something took place where the person who was running in the contest couldn't necessarily make it, or this particular guy was just smoozing people in the background. And this is kind of where they came up with this thing of, okay, we're going to let the public choose. But wait a minute, if you're saying that you're going to let the public choose in a primary contest, and yet you're saying that you can pluck the person.
And
yeah, man, I agree with you.
By the way, it's not true that corporations can do whatever they want. They can't commit fraud. And when they do commit fraud, they suffer the consequences. For example, Enron, Madoff. I mean, I don't see why the DNC's consequences should be any different. Let
me ask you this: the Alex Jones thing. Was that So I saw when your wife went on Alex Jones, and I think it was either you or your wife. I remember you went on Alex Jones, and there was a lot of criticism going around about like, hey, why are these guys going to Alex Jones? Alex Jones is a maniac. Do you accept that criticism, or do you think that criticism for the most part is bunk?
I think they don't understand our position. We're dealing with a case where, like, you know, I wake up some days and I'm just totally scared for my life, and I wonder what the hell I'm doing to, you know, and that I'm being a horrible father because I'm exposing my kids to this, and that we have to, you know, get the hell out of here. You know, it's an ongoing struggle for us. I mean, you know, to say that I'm terrified a lot of the time now. I mean, I try to stay sane as much as possible. You know, having conversations like this helps. You know, being on social media helps, you know, because I feel like I'm getting the word out there. But this is like some really scary shit that we're dealing with. You know, we're not joking around. You know, we're really fucking freaked out. And I think that anybody that's willing to talk to us and get our message out, we are going to talk to them. Okay. I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, and, you know, it's anyone who's criticizing me, you know, try walking in my shoes.
No, that's damn fair. That's damn fair. You know, it's funny. Alex Jones, I saw it and I thought to myself, the only issue I think with the Alex Jones thing is because Alex Jones can say crazy stuff. And I think the main criticism, or at least if I had to level one, if I had to come up with one, would be, does it adversely affect the case or the argument that you make by having a conversation with somebody who's saying, look, Alex Jones have said crazy things. Alex Jones, to me, vacillates between making immense sense and saying very crazy things. And there are times where he's completely lucid, where you're like, yes, Alex Jones has a point right there. He's dead on. He's absolutely right. Then you have other points where he's screaming about lizards controlling, you know, the world, and you're like, oh, dude, that's a little far.
So we live in a very strange times, Jamarl.
Yeah.
And you know, I think they reflect the situation with our media kind of reflects the chaos within our political system. It's a chaotic media landscape. There's a lot of information and disinformation, and there's a lot of sources out there, some of which seem good, some of which seem bad, and some of which are like bizarre. And I think that's a way of describing Alex Jones, like, because I have the same experience with his stuff, which is part of the reason that I'm a big fan of encouraging people to watch what Alex Jones has to say, watch what George Webb has to say, even though they get leveled as conspiracy theorists, because to me, it's obvious that the mainstream media is trying to suppress what they have to say. And so no matter how crazy it sounds, there's my thinking, just as sort of a lawyer who is trained at, you know, trying to focus on relevant information in sort of a sea of data, my instinct tells me that there is relevant information contained within this landscape of media, including Alex Jones, including George Webb, including Crowdsource the Truth, and that people should, as part of being a critical thinker, people should engage with those sources. And doesn't mean believe those sources, but at least watch them, comment on them, and discuss what is true, what is false.
Kind of benefit of the doubt. I mean, you edge on the side of evidence, but it's this, at the very least, be aware that what you believe is your reality is somewhat ambiguous. And
I mean, Alex Jones has been all over the Clintons. I mean, he's been all over them for a long time. He knows he's hit that stuff out of the park. You know, he may have said some stuff that doesn't make a whole lot of sense and is even crazy as well, but he's hit that out of the park. You know, people don't know this, but Alex Jones actually started out by going after Bush. Okay, with Bohemian Grove in 2004. That was like his first video. So he actually started against Bush. he's kind of gotten painted as alt-right. I don't think alt-right is the best label to use to describe Alex Jones. I think it's I look at it as I just kind of look at their title, InfoWars, and my sense is they're fighting what they believe to be an information war against the mainstream media. Okay, so from my perspective, I think we're all in that war right now. So there's probably something to be learned from InfoWars, although I certainly don't endorse everything that comes out of Alex Jones's mouth by a long shot.
Yeah, it's contextual. Is there evidence leaning to this particular direction? It's like I said, Alex Jones is a funny character, man. Sometimes I think he screams to get attention, but part of what he says, like, it's like with anybody else. You look at some of it and you're like, hey, that makes sense. Like if he was just a raving maniac, nobody would watch him. It's the things that he says that are dead on where you're like, hey, I think that guy has a point right there. I think he has a point. That man is saying something that I think he has a point.
People have ways of building audiences in all sorts of ways. I mean, you have to remember that, that's sort of when in the, as I'm sure that's part of, the challenges in independent media is building your audience.
Yeah.
So the fact that he has a lot of crazy shit sprinkled in there might be some kind of relic of the early days when he was building his loyal following and he was trying to get people to pay attention to what he had to say. So he said some really outrageous shit. And maybe the whole point was that he wanted to, I don't know. I'm just speculating at this point.
No, I feel you. I feel you.
I don't want to try to get inside his head too much.
Yeah, and this isn't me trying to get you to give a defense of Jones or anything else. I'm asking the question because that's the question that's being asked. No, and it's a question that I myself thought to myself, is this beneficial? Is this hurting him because of the way Alex Jones is perceived in regards to media and some of the stuff he said?
Well, here's the thing. If we have the judicial system that I hope we have, which is that the case is decided on the facts and the law and goes on in the courtroom, then, it won't be an issue. I mean, just think about it this way. Okay. There's a lot in any trial in the United States. There's a lot that goes inside the courtroom and there's a lot that goes outside the courtroom. We only have to look at, the example of OJ, okay, that trial to understand that, that case involved both aspects in large amounts. And I don't think this case really in a lot of ways is any different. And, we've had these issues involving the witnesses dying and one getting murdered. We have this whole extra, issue outside the courtroom, which is the media's Russia hacking narrative, that is related to the events of the lawsuit. But then we have the in-court proceedings, and those are a matter of judicial record. And in terms of, how the case ultimately gets decided, that's going to be, if we get to that stage, it's going to be at the trial, and it's going to be in front of a jury, and it's going to be based on the evidence that's presented to him, to that jury, as well as, the lawyers will give, their presentations and, their summaries. But it will be, just as in any trial, just as they had to sequester the OJ jury, we all remember that, it's going to be, if it gets to that stage, it's going to be the same process.
Fair enough. And so, Jeremy Scott. Oh, Jeremy, thank you, dude. I appreciate it, dude. You donated on the other video. I appreciate it. Oh man, this money thing. I don't want to say freaks me out. It weirds me out slightly. But Jeremy, I appreciate it. Jeremy Scott says, "Can you clarify your Sandy Hook statements?" It says, "Actually, to clarify Sandy Hook statements, please." So you made statements on Sandy Hook. Well,
I don't remember making a specific statement on Sandy Hook, but I'll be happy to answer.
Go for it.
Specific, if it's a tweet or something, I just don't remember saying anything about it.
They're trying to, I guess, people are trying to tie you to it in a sense. They're trying to say that he's.
I think my wife may have tweeted a video about Sandy Hook that was on the internet at one point. I think that may be what he's referring to. I think it's sort of a link to a video. So, I know that there's, some videos out there if you Google Sandy Hook that are interesting, but I haven't made any statements about Sandy Hook.
Fair enough. If you had to make a statement about Sandy Hook, would the statement be the typical narrative? I guess the idea is there's some people who believe that Sandy Hook was a hoax. Alex Jones, I think, being one of them. Is
Right.
that your belief in this? And look, this is not me taking judgment one way or
Right.
the other.
Right.
This is me asking the
Yeah,
question.
I'm gonna answer this question sort of in the way that I answered the South Rich question, which is, you know, from a lawyer's perspective.
Okay.
There are some unusual legal anomalies associated with Sandy Hook that, I think people, they're, in terms of in terms of evidence of, deaths and stuff that doesn't quite add up. And there's a couple videos out there on YouTube that, explain, the case for why there are significant anomalies there, and, on video of the event. And, there's news footage, which, suggests that there were actors at the scene. And, I found these two videos that I watched with my wife recently, and then I showed to my own parents. I found them to be compelling and worth thinking about.
Is it fair to say? Is it fair to say that dealing with something like the DNC lawsuit and dealing with this idea of people dying around you, that what's normal, or what's the typical narrative, it makes the typical narrative that comes out less something that you just jump on the bandwagon on. It makes you more skeptical. Is that fair to say?
What typical narrative specifically?
So everything that comes out, any story, whether it's 9/11 is always a big one, whether it's, like you said, the Kennedy assassination, whether it's the sarin gas thing, that the canisters that the mainstream media continuously tells us was from the Syrian government, whether it's Seth Rich was in no way possible could have been the leaker, all these narratives that they come out with. Just being in the center of this particular case, does being in the center of this case make you somewhat a bit of a skeptic in regards to the stories that come out?
Yeah. I mean, I had sort of a political awakening as a result of, what happened with Bernie Sanders, that sort of led me to reassess American history and reassess, our government and the problems associated with our government. And I think it makes me definitely more cynical than I was when, I believed that Bernie had a shot in the primaries.
Okay, that's fair. And so this cynicism does go to the idea of the Sandy Hook narrative. And look, the cynicism, I'm not necessarily saying you're saying everything was a hoax or anything else. I'm drilling into this idea of, okay, I'm somewhat cynical in regards to what I'm being told took place exactly, particularly when I'm seeing things that contradict that narrative. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think we should, at this point, not believe anything that comes from the mainstream media. And we should assume that everything that comes out of CNN and MSNBC, Fox sometimes has some true things on it, but I think CNN and MSNBC is a lie. I think we should assume that right now. As far as that's just what's going on now, though. Then that leads you to the question of what's gone on in the past and what has happened in the past under the rubric of a lie. And I think we can talk about things like 9/11, the Iraq War. We can talk about Sandy Hook. We can talk about and there are others. And I'm and when you think about the fact that the media seems to have an ability to lie so much, it suggests that that's only talking about the tip of the iceberg. And and then it shouldn't become a surprise as to why our government is so corrupt. But definitely the media is a huge part of the problem.
Bullshit man, he's asking, would the Becks be interested in crowdfunding security for themselves and their key witnesses?
I think our response to that is that, given the sheer number of people involved that are put at risk, and given the situation in our system, I mean, we wouldn't feel comfortable just taking funds for a specific group.
Okay, that's fair. All right, I've kept you on for more than 2 hours. So
no, it's all right, man. I appreciate the discussion. It was really some great questions, and I really appreciated you having me on tonight. And I hope I answered your questions.
You did. No, dude, you have no idea how much I appreciate having you on. I've talked about this case before, and I think I've called you heroic and use these glowing epic terms to describe what's been taking place.
Well, hey, listen, I appreciate that, but I think people really need to wake up and realize just how bad the problem is. And this isn't like something that like one person or one lawsuit or one, I know a lot of people are still tied to Bernie Sanders, and I don't want to, comment one way or the other on him, but like the issues that are involved here go way beyond what one person, even a guy like Bernie Sanders, could solve or even make a dent in. I mean, it's that bad.
Yeah, no, I agree, man. When it's funny when Trump says, drain the swamp, it's part of you wish he actually means it. It's
right.
It's this thing.
Realize that even if Trump does mean it, I'm not even sure that like 2 terms of a Trump presidency are enough to drain it.
Oh man, I don't want 2 terms of a Trump presidency.
What I'm saying is if he means it, and if
he focused on that. If he said, "Oh,
if he means it," I don't think it's an 8-year job. Like I think it's a much bigger job than that. I mean, it's that bad. It's that fucking bad. Given
how long do you think it would take for your lawsuit to go through?
I mean, ordinarily, a lawsuit can have a lifespan of maybe 4 or 5 years typically, but in a case like this, given what's at stake, I mean, it could be longer. Or it could even be shorter. I mean, it really depends on how things shake out.
What would be one of the ways? This is a bullshit man question. That sounds weird, but bullshit man is his title.
I know bullshit man. I know bullshit.
Yeah, he's an animal. The man is awesome. What would be some of the methods to get this injected into mainstream media? Or for that matter, do you know?
That's a really great question, because I don't think the question involves like how do you get the truth into an organization that is responsible for lying. I think maybe it's more of a question: will mainstream media implode on itself? Because I think they're already looking really ridiculous up there. So they could black this out. As long as they want, really. I mean, they choose what lawsuits they want to focus on. So I don't know if there is a guarantee that we'll, see the coverage of this case by at least a direct route. But then again, Donald Trump's tweets have been known to gain a lot of coverage, and Donald Trump has tweeted about issues related to this case. So, maybe it would come through a Donald Trump tweet. That's just
yes. But man, he's a bumbling. Oh God, it's like if Trump wanted to get the people off his ass about the Russia thing, if he wanted to literally decimate mainstream media, I mean, just cripple this idea of fake news, hit him where it hurts. I mean, all of this stuff about Russia hacking us and everything else leads directly to your case with the DNC.
I think he's had a lot of infiltrators in his administration to deal with, though. Just remember that, you know, the RNC is kind of like their analog to the DNC, and I think they very much wanted to bring Trump down, but they were sort of in a weaker position with respect to him.
Yes.
And I think that Donald Trump has spent a lot of his just getting set up having to deal with infiltrators, and similar to the way that, you know, the Bernie campaign had to deal with DNC and Hillary infiltrators. Trump has probably had to deal with RNC infiltrators. I mean, he just fired Reince Priebus the other day, and you know, he was the source of leaks. But you know, he seriously, I think a lot of the people in DC and a lot of the people that sort of latched onto his administration were actually like trying to bring him down. So he's, you know, I think he's been spending a lot of time trying to consolidate his power.
You know, I have mixed feelings about it. Like my responsibility that I've taken on, my self-appointed responsibility as a guy covering this stuff, comes into conflict with my own value system. It honestly does. My goal in this is to be as honest as I can be when I look at this stuff and say, all right, this is my honest appraisal. This is what I think is going on based upon the news and information I have at my disposal. Mm-hmm. At the same token, it's this thing of, oh man, he's so gross. And being so gross, I want him to fail at his task. But I want him to succeed at a very specific task. Trust busting is essentially saying, yes, I want to go after him because I think those guys are corrupt.
Right. Problem
is, he's corrupt himself. And so you have this thing of everybody in Washington with a case on their heads. Like it's aggravating to me because you're stuck, you know, backing the pony, the dark pony, the dark horse, the crazy guy, at the very least for the 4 years, because I want him in that office. I don't want Pence in. I want Trump in that office when it comes up again in 2024 in the election. Because if progressives get their shit straight, if these Trump supporters get their shit straight and they realize, okay, this is not the guy who we thought he was, and the Democratic Party puts up somebody who's actually a real progressive, say if Bernie Sanders runs again, well, whatever. I know people have their feelings about Sanders. I guarantee you, if Sanders runs again, all those people who have those issues with Bernie Sanders will melt away. And they would say, oh, I still love this guy. And they'll vote for that guy.
And but, do you think the DNC is not going to rig the primaries again, though?
I think the DNC would have hell to pay. I honestly do. The DNC is, the DNC right now is scrambling. They can barely make money. They've lost 15 million.
No, I disagree with you. I think the DNC
really?
is incredibly arrogant. Well, I am shocked by the DNC's reaction, and maybe this is because, you know, I'm, you know, more naive than most, but I am shocked by the DNC's reaction to openly rigging the primaries and being so demonstrably unpopular that they just lost so much money in a monumental failure and are despised by the population that they haven't publicly embraced Bernie Sanders as the head of that party, because that was really the only way they maybe stood a chance of surviving that disaster. I just don't see a future for them. I think, and I don't even know if that would have worked, to be quite honest. I don't even know if that would have worked. That might have been a last gasp. I think, you know, to be quite honest, I think their last gasp was they might have had a chance of beating Trump if they had put Bernie on the ticket. Maybe.
I think they would have won if Sanders was running. I think all the polls.
As the VP.
Landslided them.
No, as the VP. I didn't mean as the president. I meant if they made Bernie's. I'm sorry. I meant their last gasp was when they didn't make Bernie Hillary's vice president. So in other words, they could have gotten away with rigging the primaries, but they could have at least put him on the ticket as the vice president to just sort of, you know, because I think there would have been, you know, Bernie people that would have held their nose and voted for that ticket just because Bernie was up there as the VP, but they weren't even willing to give him that. So
no, they were arrogant. They were immensely arrogant.
So they've been singing that tune all the way until really the Owan brothers got arrested. And, you know, apparently, you know, W. Wasserman Schultz is in a really bad mood about that. So this is the only time it's really started to hit them. So I just don't think, I'm just telling you, they're not scrambling around until like now. And that's because of the criminal consequences. They see their progressive base as a non-entity.
You think so? See, oh man, maybe I'm misreading this. I read this. Okay, I read this in two ways. I read this as, A, we're going to be so arrogant that we don't. They took it as people are going to be so terrified of Donald Trump that we don't have to worry about picking. We can pick a Tim Kaine for to be a VP. Screw Elizabeth Warren. We can pick Tim Kaine. Whatever about progressives.
No, they wanted nothing to do with Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, nothing. They didn't want the platform. They were like, this is the most progressive platform in history. But the person who you're running it is Hillary Clinton. And you've just had 8 years of Obama, who ran as a progressive. Nobody knew who Obama was when he ran. So Obama could come out and say, I'm hoping change. I am goddamn Obama, and I'm going to be something different.
But the progressivism of Obama was a total lie, though.
It was a sham. But the problem is, people knew it was a sham.
Right.
Like, so at the end of 8 years, you look back and you say he gave 95% of the wealth to the top 1%. He was drone killing 90% of the people we didn't even know who we were kidding. That doesn't look very progressive to me. Now, the next person comes up and says, hey, I'm status quo 101, and I'm going to be Obama 2.0. Now, progressives have already said that the first person lied to me. What is Hillary Clinton going to do to convince these people that, yes, we're really on your side? And then to add to that, the demoralizing, we're cheating your candidate. And in addition to cheating your candidate, we expect you to come around and vote for us, despite us cheating your candidate, because Donald Trump is a goddamn apocalypse. And he is going to eat your dogs and your babies if you put him in that office. Well, that didn't work. That didn't work. Then they spent $21 million trying to get a guy to pretend that he was a Republican, and the people chose a real Republican. It's like they're burning money on the White House lawn. They lost 66 of 99 state legislatures. I took this as, we're going to be arrogant until the end.
Yeah. And
you lose $21 million. Again, like you're losing left and right. You can't win an office seat. And it's like, what do you do? Now, at the Politicon, they came on and says, okay, you're right. We're liars. We're liars. We lean to our people. I mean, the guy gave us this come to Jesus moment. I can imagine the crowd screaming shame at him. Shame! Shame for what you were doing. But you didn't come out and say you cheated Bernie Sanders, which is what I need. That's what I need. Now, the question becomes, do they turn the ship around and say, okay, screw it. You're right. You're right. We're going to take Sanders' platform because that's what the people said they wanted. Or do you think they're just going to be so arrogant they're going to ride this ship into the ground? The captain goes down with the Titanic.
No, they have no other choice but to go into the ground. At least the leadership that's still calling the shots. Whether or not someone takes the party over at some point by force or some other measure, or whatever that might look like, I have no idea. But at least the way it's led now with the people in charge, I mean, they're all like, I think it's useful to think of them as all one big mafia. So, the mafia doesn't give up.
That's fair. Right? That's fair. But one caveat: the mafia doesn't necessarily give a shit about how people perceive them in this case. The Democratic Party, just as being a political party, if they want to exist, they have to care. Meaning, if you're going to lose the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, the presidency.
Yeah, but if they cared, they wouldn't be in this situation to begin with.
But there's a such thing as brinksmanship. Meaning there is a such thing as, we're going to try this. We're going to try this one last go. You know what I mean? Like this thing.
They'll try a last. They'll try a last go. It's going to look ridiculous.
It already has,
right?
You had Hillary Clinton.
Well, you haven't seen ridiculous yet.
You've seen. They lost the guy who had a 40% approval rating.
No, you haven't. No. This is just.
That's not ridiculous enough.
No, this isn't. No. I wish it were. I say that in all seriousness. It's getting worse. It's getting. I mean, in terms of the Democratic Party. Unless some miracle happens, and it's not. I mean, even a miracle would be, I don't see it.
I hope you're wrong. Like it's not. Look, I have this thing in me. I haven't voted for a Democrat since the primaries, And there was some guy in Virginia who they were trying to brand as a progressive. It's like, this guy is a progressive. And you look at his record, and you're like, the hell are they talking about? What do you mean this guy's a progressive? They got lost. I went in and I think I put in somebody. I forgot who I put in. I think I put in myself, my own name, on the ballot or something like that, saying, if this guy's going to represent me, he's not getting my vote. Mm-hmm. And that's my policy. That's the policy I recommend for everybody, a scorched earth policy. Meaning, yes, you're going to have to walk through the wilderness for a while, but you're walking through the wilderness because you've allowed your country to devolve to the level that it is. It's not, it's our faults. It's our collective faults. We're the ones who put these idiots in office, and we're the ones at the very least who's continuously voting for one ridiculous idiot after the next. Like, for instance, I know you say you had your political awakening recently, but come on. I mean, it's one of those things of, even me, you're just kind of in this darkness of, oh, I'm voting Democrat because I'm voting Democrat. And then you wake up one day like, holy shit, is this what's going on in politics?
Right.
But well, that was but we're still responsible.
Right. Well, the thing is that you called it. I mean, it's an awakening, right? You have your awakening, but I think a lot of people are having their awakening, and that's sort of the issue here. It's not limited. You know, I think we started this conversation by, you know, my thought was, or you know, there's a lot more going on than just this lawsuit. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
Agreed.
And you know, that sort of knowledge prevents me from, you know, having the optimism that, you know, I had not that long ago, which was, you know, 2016, you know, really hoping that, you know, Bernie Sanders was going to win.
Yeah.
Or at least have a fair election. At least have a fair election.
Whether they realize that or not, that optimism, that energy goes somewhere else, man. And it's not, right. When that optimism gets deflated and you find out, not deflated by natural means. Like, I agree with you. People look at politics and they say, holy shit, look, who is that guy? Bernie Sanders. He's saying stuff that I like. You know, I haven't seen this before in America. This guy calls himself a socialist. I don't care what he calls himself. He's saying what I like. And he goes from one place to the next, Trump country and regular Democrat country. And they say, holy shit, I like what this man is saying. And it goes beyond, I like what this man is saying. It goes into this thing of, what's the world you want? But fundamentally, that's what Sanders is making the case for. What is the world that you want? How do you want your world to be? And do you believe as a country we can be fundamentally different than what we are? Now, you give somebody that vision, you rip that vision away from them, and you're ripping it away from them, not because there's a majority of the people who say, yes, we don't want that vision, but because they cheat to do it.
Right.
That energy turns rancid.
Yeah, I think you put that, you know, I think you put that well. I mean, there's a play or there's a poem, you know, Raisin in the Sun, you know, what happens, you know, when a raisin, you know, does it explode, you know, what happens when your dreams, you know, I'm not quoting it well, but, you know, like what happens when your dreams, where do your dreams go, you know, when they're deferred, you know, what happens when they're deferred? You know, and, you know, that's sort of an analogous question. And, you know, I'll just close the interview with this. I mean, you know, you have, that's why we have a justice system. Okay. That's where the energy goes. Okay. When you are defrauded, you seek justice, and hopefully, you know, our legal system, you know, as far as sort of the anger from these primaries, hopefully our justice system can diffuse some of that energy into a just result, because the alternative, you know, I think is ugly. But, you know, I'll close by saying, you know, I think there's a very, very ugly political situation facing this country, and, you know, progressives, you know, really need to start getting realistic about that.
Fair enough, man. I really appreciate you doing this interview, and I'm looking at the comments, and the majority of the people also absolutely appreciate you doing this interview, and are giving you massive amounts of thank you for what you've done in regards to going after these guys, you know, saying,
I appreciate that.
Sticking the ground and saying, yeah, we're going to do something about this. We're not just going to be cheated.
Well, so I appreciate that. And just everybody stay engaged, stay informed, and, you know, do what it takes. I mean, the fight here, you know, it's not just in the political arena. It's not just in the legal arena. It's in the media arena. and that requires, awareness that everybody can contribute in terms of, raising awareness in society, because, we on social media, who are active in social media, whatever we're doing, we're kind of in our own bubble, right? We assume the rest of the population is as enlightened as us, or as knowledgeable as us, or as aware of us, and we misassume when we assume that, okay? Because, the rest of the population is too, but by and large, people are too distracted in this country to really know what's going on, okay? And that's been true for a long time. We are far from the political consciousness that we need. It's getting better now that we have social media. It's getting better, but there's a lot more to be done. And it's a long, long project. So we have to all kind of work together and spread awareness.
Very cool, man. Thank you again, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jamarl. Have a good night. Okay, take care.
You too.
Bye now.
All right, guys. That was Jared Beck, DNC fraud lawsuit. I think it was a decent interview. Like, sometimes I have a hard time seeing how these interviews turn out until I actually look at the interview. I think this was a good one. He answered pretty much any question that was posed to him. He answered every question that I think of. He answered many of the questions that you guys asked yourselves. By losers. That's funny. Yeah. That was pretty badass. I appreciate him. Thanks. Good looking out, man. And like I said before, immensely appreciative of you pulling this lawsuit. I just feel like our political system is ossified, and attacking it from this legal one sometimes brings up interesting consequences. And so, Jared Beck, good looking out. Nico House, good looking out for walking in their lawsuit, or walking in their office that day. Elizabeth Beck again, fucking awesome. Thank you for your service, all of you. All right, guys, I am going to end it here. This went a long time. It went, what, like an hour and 2.5 hours. Okay, fair enough. He sat here for 2.5 hours. Fair enough. Dude, I appreciate it, man. All right, guys, I'm going to call it a night. Look, we had a ton of viewers. I appreciate all you guys staying till the end. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Thanks for the interest. All right, have a good night, everyone. If you enjoy the content, feel free to share, subscribe, and of course, you can always support the work through PayPal or Patreon. Thank you.